Let's give it up for our next keynote speaker.
So welcome everybody to my talk in UX India. My name is Itamar Medeiros. I'm from Brazil originally, but I left Brazil in 2005. First I moved to India. Now for the last 10 years I'm working in Germany. And if you do the math, I don't need to tell you how old I am. I've been doing more design work outside Brazil than I've done in Brazil. So I've been doing design for 25 years, but at some point in my career, I realized that my job is not just to sit there waiting for people to tell me what to do. I realized that most of the times, not everybody is in the position, or at least some projects, there's some confusion about what is that we're trying to get done here, right? At that point in my career, I realized that the work of design is also a work of facilitation, helping people make better decisions, right? At that point, I was not the design giant that you see in front of you here. I would go to the beach and people would kick copies of like design everyday things in my face, right? So I'm going to tell a story about how that transition happened. When I first joined SAP, that was a while back, I was hired for this project that, I guess now I can speak freely about it. It was a very secret project that SAP was called the Next Generation Payroll. We're moving the traditional payroll solution from like traditional ERP systems to the cloud, right? The cloud is the new thing back then. I don't know, most of you probably don't know what payroll is, you don't know what it does, but you see the benefit of it because you get paid every month or every week, whatever is the frequency that you get paid. So this was the most high visibility project internally because like this is the cash cow of the company, but nobody could talk about it, right? It's like like we cannot tell the customers that we're moving to the next generation. The project was so high visibility internally that they, like the first month I was there, they moved me, like they made me go to the US to meet the senior leadership of the company. We're talking like L2 level leadership of success factors. So when I get there, we spend a couple of days of workshop trying to figure out like what should payroll do, what are the list of features that we need to migrate. Like if you've been working enterprise software, you probably heard like what are the features that we need to do to keep parity, right? And then like remember this is the first month that I'm there, and everybody's talking about like I don't know, retro calculations and actuals and stuff like this, and I'm just nodding my head. This is like still trying to catch up with everything. Then at some point in that first week of the workshop, our chief revenue officer, Marianne, she just goes around the room asking like what we should do, and at that point, unfortunately, I cannot tell exactly like the details for the purpose of intellectual property protection. But there were basically two approaches that we could do. We could do strategy A or strategy B, and then she started going around the room, being the good leader that she was, to try to reach consensus, like, hey, what we should do. Then at some point, she points at me like, which one we should do? And I'm still in the first month of the company, and I'm looking at that with that confused face a bit. The go-to-strategy, go-to-market president just looks at me, he's like, yeah, he's been with the company for 1 month, what is he gonna say? Then I took a deep breath, I reflected on the two approaches, and then I answered her back with another question, which usually my mom says you probably shouldn't do. But basically I told her the following. Well, it sounds like strategy A help us acquire net new customers. Approach B, help us keep the existing customers satisfied. So they seem to be equally good, but to achieve different outcomes. So which outcome is more important now? That was my answer to her. She took a couple of seconds, reflected it. That's actually a very good question, and then that changed the direction of the rest of the workshop for the rest of the week, right? So this is the power of outcomes. This is that's what I wanted to talk about today. So if you're not going to be able to remember anything from my talk, I want you to remember these three things, right? Thinking in terms of outcomes will help you gain a greater understanding of what are the problems you're trying to solve, and how does your work creates the impact, how does it plays in the big picture, right? The kind of work that I do at SAP, I'm actually interested a lot in the second one, which is thinking in terms of outcomes allows the teams to have much, much stronger focus and alignment. And here's something that I observe in these 25 years that I've been doing design. Most teams cannot innovate, not because they lack the creativity or they lack the tools. Most of the times teams cannot innovate because they are not aligned on the problem that they're trying to solve. They're just going off in different directions. And they get distracted by the friction, right? And finally, the last point that I hope that you can remember from this talk is that if I have to introduce a new tool to you, it will be this jobs to be done framework that we've been using a lot in SAP, right? Which is basically a way that you can try to come up with a common language to describe value so that you can align the goals of the project to the outcomes that the organization trying to achieve, right? So let's get going. The power of outcomes, and this is, you're going to notice that my talk is going to be not so much about the tools and the process, it's going to be about mindset, right? So what I'm going to talk about today in this talk is, in terms of outcomes helps definitely product work. It helps you a lot in terms of the design process. But I hope that some of these things that you're going to hear today also help you change your mindset, right? So all of a sudden you can apply this kind of thinking in other areas of your life. Anytime that you want to change the way things are going, anytime that you try to create change, thinking in terms of outcomes is really helpful. The definition of outcome that I'm going to use here for the purpose of this talk is coming from my friend Joshua Seiden, right? Let's say he describes outcomes, especially product outcomes, is the change in human behavior that drives business impact, right? And usually, and this is probably the greatest mindset thinking that you need in order to adopt this outcome-driven thinking, because, and this is like, I was guilty of that, and I hope that you probably realize that you also might be doing what I'm going to say now is this. As designers, you tend to advocate for the user. This, like, oh, we need to improve usability, we need to make things faster and easy to use and so on. That's all great, right? But let's put it this way, this is all expected. This is just like the basics of your product, right? What you need is to do that and help the business, right? And the problem is, like, a lot of the times we get distracted. The stakeholder or the project lead or whoever owns the outcomes, like the OKRs of a product, is trying to tell you something, and then you're just vomiting stuff like usability and user research and stuff like that. These are all great things. These are all very important. But you need to understand, like, what is that we're trying, like, what is I'm going to use these words, like, what is that we're trying to achieve here? Many times in this talk. for the purpose of this one thing that if you can't remember anything else, is probably the biggest mindset shift that you can adopt that's going to help you when you go back to work next week. Having a clear outcome, especially at the team level, creates focus and alignment, right? And I'm going to describe three kinds of outcomes that are going to be useful for the purpose of this conversation here. So there's the business outcome on the right, which is the things that the stakeholder or the owner of your company cares about, right? Let's say revenue, growth, customer satisfaction. Let me tell you something, and a few of the speakers of the conference already mentioned this. I know sounds bad because this is something that you think that you cannot influence, but let's face it, the stuff that matters is on the right. If the company doesn't achieve their goals, you don't get paid. Or your bonus gets affected. Or maybe you're part of the next layoff, right? So this is the stuff that I've seen a lot of designers being completely disconnected from this. I'm not saying that's your fault, but I mean, if you're a business leader here, if you're a product owner, or if somehow you have an influence on the business outcomes of your company, here's also something that you can help the designers on your organization. You need to get better explaining to people what is it that we're trying to achieve here in the business, right? The stuff on the left here, this is usually the kind of stuff that we have a lot of influence on, right? We understand the customers, we spend time doing research with them, we know what they want, right? Which is the customer outcome. The way that I've been trying to work with teams at SAP is like, again, going back to this like usability, easy to use, and easy to learn and stuff. This is all stuff that is language that we are used to because we come from a design background. Most people don't get it, right? Even sometimes we have a hard time verbalize it. Like, and if you think about it, there are very few frameworks out there that is actually able to explain what people want. Because most people don't know what they want, right? So even if you ask them what they want, they will not be able to verbalize in a way that you can bring it back to the teams. So we've been using these jobs to be done as a way to come up with some sort of a common currency to describe value. The intersection between the two is what I'm calling product outcomes, right? What is this measurable changes in behavior that drives business impact? The key words here is change, but also measurable. You need to be able to see that the things are changing. And let me give you a couple of examples here. The other tip here in terms of how to switch to this outcome-driven mindset is always starts with the end in mind, right? Which is, by the way, is not just a outcome-driven thinking kind of a tip, but if you think about any other framework, how to get things done, or growth mindset, is always like, start with the end in mind, right? Well, the end is to achieve some sort of business outcome. Some of these are known in your company, like, for example, your business unit is supposed to increase 5% adoption, or reduce churn by 10%. I'm going to use some examples here from SuccessFactors. These examples, the numbers might not be the right ones, but I'm just going to use the general kind of categories of outcomes as an example, right? So SAP, we have like over 100 products. The one that I'm going to use for the purpose of the illustration here is what we call the learning tool. So if you're in enterprise software, you get hired by your company, most of the times you have like some onboarding training that you have to go through, or the ones that you probably get in the beginning, like towards the end of the year. Don't forget to do your intellectual property protection compliance course and stuff like this. It's usually from a solution from a company like ours, right? So you want adoption to increase. You want more people taking trainings, or you want to reduce the churn on that solution. That's the business outcome, right? If you walk backwards, product outcomes will be something like employees complete non-mandatory courses 30% more than previous month, right? This is the kind of stuff that you should be able to measure. You should be able to see from month to month, are things moving down or up, right? Reduce the amount of unfinished courses. I don't know about you, but like if you have a learning solution like that in your company, there's probably a lot of courses that you started or you never finished, right? So this could be another, like reduce churn, could be reduce the amount of unfinished courses. With those in mind, what are the things that people are doing with our learning solution? What do they want to get out of our learning solution that will help drive those numbers, right? I just picked a couple examples here. When choosing which courses to take, I want to access to personalized learning paths so that I can maximize my career advancement opportunities. By the way, if you are familiar with the jobs to be done framework, this is what we call a job statement. Don't get too caught up on the format, because like I've seen a lot of people like, when this happens, I want that to happen so that, you know, like the traditional user story templates. I've seen templates do a lot of damage to product thinking, right? Because people think like just because I use the right format, all of a sudden like I have better outcomes, right? Another example here, when choosing which courses to take, I want recommendations of course that match my learning style so that I ensure that I finish the course that I take. Right? So, if you think about it, a lot of the work at the higher levels of strategy, at least my experience, is not so much about which strategic framework you're using or which tool, is more about the conversations that generate this alignment. Right? There's some goal out there, and there's work happening quote unquote down here. How do you connect the dots, right? I personally, as a facilitator, I spend a lot of time, most of the time, just getting people together to talk about like how do we generate this alignment, right? So basically the person that codified the jobs to be done framework in the way that we know it today, he's suggesting that if the companies want to create breakthrough products, they need to understand what is it that customers are trying to achieve. And the funny thing is, it took a marketing guy to explain what is the work that we do. If you think about it, like as a user experience designer, you're trying to create products that people love, then you need to understand what is that they're doing. What is that they like about the experience with our product? What is that they don't like about the experience with their product? And the beauty of jobs to be done is that it kind of puts the technology aside for a second, because your product is just one in the many kind of products or technologies that helps people do that. And I'm going to get to more details in a second here, but most of the times your product is on the way of people trying to get something done. So let's talk about these jobs to be done, right? As I mentioned in success factors, in SAP success factors, we're using jobs to be done as a common language, because usually what happens in teams is this, and this is not to say anything bad about teams, it's just the nature of the diversity of roles, right? You have developers, we have user experience designers, you have architects, you have product managers. Because that's the level of complexity that it takes to create enterprise software, but because each person comes from a different background, different culture, different languages, they all have a different way of describing value or describing what people want. Instead of us trying to meet in the middle or trying to do this translation all the time, depending on who we are talking with, we thought that it's probably better to just use this one framework called jobs to be done. And let me give you probably the best description that I could think of is that people don't want the quarter-inch drill. What they want is a hole in the wall, right? This is not a user experience definition. This is actually a marketing definition, but we noticed that it fits really well with the kind of thinking that we want to happen at the user experience team. If you take that line of thought one step further, you realize that people don't even care about the hole in the wall. What they want is to hang a picture on the wall, right? And this is the first power of outcome, right? Let's say it tries to put the outcome in terms of context. When people are trying to get this done, what is that they want to happen? It's not what is the tool that they need, right? So if you think about it, like a driller makes holes in the wall, makes holes on concrete, and wood, and so on. But if you think about it, if all that people want is to hang a picture on the wall, the tape, I don't know, I mean, I've done a lot of moving around, and I realized that like every time I need to like bring all my paintings and hang them on the wall, I have to think about all the hassle that drilling holes in the wall makes. Like there's a lot of noise. I mean, I guess noise is not a big deal here, but like where I live in Germany, I cannot make holes in the walls during like the lunchtime or weekends or after 8, right? So that means that I have to coordinate, like, can I make a hole in the wall now, right? So the tape reduces already this problem, minimize the amount of noise during the process of hanging pictures on the wall. I don't have to plug holes in the walls after I'm done, right? Or minimize the amount of cleaning I have to do because like all of a sudden there's no holes, there's no dust created. So this is the kind of change that the jobs to be done or outcome-driven thinking brings to the project. You kind of abstract the technology for a second and look in the context of what people were trying to do, and you find out all these other opportunities for innovation that it comes, right? So Jim called back basically, and this is interesting that he took a marketing framework to kind of help designers think more about like how to help product teams come up with different innovations, right? When you look through the jobs to be done perspective, you realize that the job of the aim of the job performer or the persona or whoever you're observing is not interact with your company or with your product. They want something else, and usually your product is just a means to get this done, right? So your job as a product leader, as a designer, or as a software architect is to understand that first before you can even propose a solution. So to put this in perspective, I'm going to use, like, there's many different frameworks to kind of, as I said, I hate this kind of sitting down and writing user stories and let's say this throw over the wall to someone. I like doing a lot of facilitation work and bring teams together and say, okay, let's do a workshop to find out like what are the jobs to be done we're trying to achieve this release. So you're going to see a lot, if you look at my talks or if you look at some of the artifacts I create, I do a lot of canvas-based work because this is like allows people to put stuff on the wall and then move it around. I'm going to make the case here that jobs to be done, it's probably an easy entry path for people that are in the design discipline, product designers, user researchers, UX writers, because it's already based on some of the language and some of the kind of the tools and the techniques that we already have, right? So for example, this one, the value proposition canvas, you have basically the customer profile on your right, which is like a round peg, and you have your product on the left side. So if you think about it, a lot of the discussions that we have when you're doing kind of backlog grooming and planning is trying to put a round peg on a square hole, right? Users say they want to do this, but the product team wants to do that, right? Let's say then this like trying to solve the two at the same time usually never ends well. So this is why I like doing this kind of thinking. Let's focus on trying to understand the outcomes first, then we map it to the product capabilities. So let's use a couple of examples, right? You go there to the field, you talk to people, you observe their behavior, and there's a couple of outcomes, right? Let's say going back to the learning solution again. In terms of gains, right? What will make the customer's life easier? This is not they telling you. This is you observing them, and then you write this down, like you synthesize in terms of insights, right? Oh, I want trainees that help advance my career, right? Or I want to finish the course that I start so I don't feel like a failure, right? Or pain points, right? The pain points are kind of like especially in enterprise software, pain points is basically is the raw material where most of the innovation comes, right? Courses take too long, or I find the course material boring. Well, when you have insights like this, then you can write a job statement that synthesizes that, right? When I'm choosing which courses to take, I want a learning, like a personalized learning path that helps me advance my career. So now with that, then you can do the mapping of what the product should do. So you could think about technology, right? Like AI recommendations or gamified learning experiences. Then you can think about a product, how the product allows you to match those opportunities. By the way, the example here, the opportunity marketplace is an actual product of success factors that came from that kind of thinking, right? So now let me do this. Like in every conference, I've noticed, like at least my experience when I was first starting in this trade, and I see a lot of people coming to me after I give talks and stuff. It's like, this is a great talk. I wish my boss was here, or I wish my CEO was here, right? So I'm going to try to make this very practical and give you tips. Let's say, this is the kind of stuff that I hope you don't have to wait for someone in the top to tell you, yeah, from now on, like starting Monday, we're going to start working on outcomes. I'm going to give you some practical tips about you in your area of influence, whatever that is. You can start putting this into practice. The first thing I want you to remember is the following. Not every one of you might end up being on a career like a people management career, right? But most of the times, like, and maybe you don't have the ambition to be a leader, right? But to get stuff like get work that has any significance, most of the times you have to influence people, right? And this is the true measure of leadership. It's not your title, it's the ability to influence people, and that's all that matters. At least, and this has been true, I quote the work of John Maxwell, but this has been true in my career, right? Even if I give if I was only a senior designer, I would be able to do this. Most of the times you get that title and you realize that things don't change that much, right? You probably get more work, but probably not, with more power comes more work, and more responsibility, right? But no, not necessarily more leverage. So here are a couple of 4 tips that I'm going to give it to you. Comes Monday after the conference and then you want to put this to work. Start small, think big, but act fast, right? Try to find an ally. There is someone out there in the out there in your company that probably already used this word out. Because by the way, if you're in the agile, if you have an agile coach here on the audience, you probably heard of this outcomes versus outputs. If you have someone that already used this word outcomes in your conversation, maybe that's a good person to start, right? Find an ally. Work with that person, try to understand what they're trying to do as a project goal, and see if maybe for that project that you mentioned last week, maybe we could use this outcome thinking that I learned. With that person, work out a project. Don't try to change the whole organization. Don't expect to change the process of the whole organization. At least what I observe is not only as a design strategist and success factors, but even just as being like a coach for a lot of teams, is instead of waiting for the company to change all the processes internally, maybe you demonstrate value by showing success in a small project, like in a pilot project. So work with that ally that you just found. Try to find a project that you can work together. Put the process to work. Then reflect with that stakeholder, right? Don't wait for, let's work 6 months on this, and then in the end, we know if it worked or not, right? Try to reflect as we go along. Then iterate, change, and share. Because what I notice is, no matter how big the change you want to introduce to the company, a lot of stakeholders will be a lot more comfortable if you can demonstrate that the process or whatever it is that you're asking them to change really worked. Right? Now, let me talk to the leaders in this group here, right? So, I've seen, and this is like, I don't know if there's any people that are not from the design community here, let's say, for example, product managers or leaders of product. I noticed that, and I hope I'm not sounding too critical here, but I noticed that a lot of people tend to say, oh no, yes, we value the role of UX, we value design and everything. There is no talking in the world that's going to make up for being actionable on some of these principles that I'm going to be here. So a lot of designers are trying to make good change in the way that companies operate. People say they want design, but they act in a different way, right? So let's think about what is the role of leaders in the organization, right? Basically, is not telling people how to do things. You tell them what is the outcome that you expect, and people will be you will be surprised of what kind of solutions that they can come up with. So I'm going to give four tips for product leaders here. And this is not even an outcome thing, it's just like good leadership. You model the behavior. If you want people to think in terms of outcomes, you need to talk to them in terms of outcomes. You need to stop giving them list of features. Like, oh, the roadmap for this release is let's ship the timesheet. Let's ship the interactive pay statement. These say nothing about what is the outcomes of what we're trying to do. You should be saying things like, we're trying to increase engagement by 25%, or we're trying to move that metric or that metric. So if you don't model the behavior, people are not going to learn what is the behavior expected, right? Then obviously, great training. Maybe you can share with people some of these things. You can share this talk. I do have some material that you can read. But here's probably the biggest thing that a leader can do for the organization when it comes to outcome-driven thinking, is let people experiment. When someone comes to you on Monday and say, hey, Itamar told me I should probably have a small project and you should say, great idea. Go out, try this little thing, come back to us in terms of did it work or did it not work? What can we do better? And probably the best thing that you can do in terms of getting people into this mindset of not fearing failure, is to shine light on where things are working. Maybe there's already someone in your organization trying this outcome-driven thinking. It's just that nobody heard about them, right? So you need to share the light on them. So again, I'm reaching the end of my talk. I just want you to remember these three things, right? Adopting this outcome thinking helps you get a better understanding of how your actions drive the goals of the organization, right? Outcomes help you, the teams be more focused and aligned, and this job to be done helps you align the organization outcomes with the customer needs. And I know this was not too deep into the skills or not into the tools, but it's not so much about the tools. This is just to get you exposed. You can always learn about it. It's more about how do you change your thinking. So if you want to connect with me and you want to ask me more questions, you can always reach out to me, or you can follow me in LinkedIn, okay? So thank everyone for the opportunity.